News of the impending marriage spread through Kepler Station like wildfire. Marcus had expected some reaction from the community, but he hadn't anticipated the sheer variety of responses his announcement would generate. Crix, the four-armed Zentari merchant who had been Marcus's neighbor for over 2 decades, was delighted. "About time," he declared, slapping Marcus on the back with 2 of his arms. "I always wondered when you would realize what those girls meant to you. Even when they were children, they looked at you like you were their whole world." The station administrator, however, was less enthusiastic. Commander Sarah Walsh sat across from Marcus in her office, her expression carefully neutral. "Marcus, I need to ask this officially. Are you certain this is what you want? Kyrithi marriage customs are ... complex. There will be legal implications, cultural ramifications, and frankly, political complications." "What kind of complications?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The hegemony won't be pleased that 2 of their most valuable former assets are choosing to remain on a frontier station. They might view this as a security risk, or worse, as a deliberate rejection of their authority." Marcus had considered this. The sisters negotiated their release legally. They're free citizens now. Legally, yes. But the hegemony has a long memory and a longer reach. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Commander, 22 years ago, I took in 2 refugee children because it was the right thing to do. Today, 2 remarkable women have asked me to share their lives. I'm not going to let political considerations stop me from doing what's right a second time." Commander Walsh studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Good answer. You have my full support and the station's official blessing. But Marcus, be careful. Not everyone will be as understanding as we are." The marriage preparations began immediately. Kyrithi wedding customs, Marcus learned, were intricate and deeply meaningful. The ceremony itself would take place over 3 days, with each day representing a different aspect of the bond being formed. The first day was called the Day of Recognition, where the community formally acknowledged the union. The second was the Day of Joining, where vows were exchanged and the legal bond was established. The third was the Day of Celebration, a festival that could last from dawn to dawn. Lyra and Naya threw themselves into the preparations with infectious enthusiasm. They had brought with them not just their personal belongings, but crates of precious Kyrithi ceremonial items that had been thought lost when their homeworld was destroyed. "We've been saving these for over 20 years. Lyra explained as she carefully unpacked delicate crystal ornaments. "Waiting for the right moment, the right place. We always knew we would need them someday," Naya added, holding up a shimmering length of fabric that seemed to move on its own. "We just never imagined it would be here with you." The station's diverse population began offering their own contributions to the celebration. The Soren engineers volunteered to create a ceremonial arch using their expertise in metallurgy and crystalline structures. The Corvinth miners, despite their fearsome reputation, turned out to be skilled in textile work and offered to weave traditional decorations. Even species that Marcus had never seen work together before began collaborating on various aspects of the ceremony. The event was becoming something larger than just a wedding. It was becoming a celebration of unity itself, but not everyone was supportive. 3 days before the ceremony, a hegemony diplomatic courier arrived unannounced. The official, a stern-faced human woman named Director Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, requested a private meeting with Marcus and the sisters. "I'm here to make you a final offer," she said without preamble. "The hegemony is prepared to overlook this irregularity. If Lyra and Naya agree to return to their positions within 6 months, they would be granted extended leave for personal matters and full pardons for any breach of contract issues." "And if they refuse?" Marcus asked. Director Chun's smile was cold. "Then their citizenship status will be reviewed. Trade agreements with this station might need to be reconsidered. Supply chains could be disrupted. It would be unfortunate for everyone involved." Marcus felt the familiar anger rising in his chest. But before he could respond, Lyra stepped forward. "Director Chun," she said, her voice carrying an authority Marcus had never heard before. I think you may be operating under some outdated assumptions about our value to the hegemony and our vulnerability to pressure. She activated a small holographic projector, displaying what appeared to be legal documents and financial statements. Over the past 5 years, Naya and I have established extensive business relationships throughout the Mid and Outer Rim territories. We control agricultural supply chains that feed over 40 billion people. We hold patents on farming techniques that generate more than 2 trillion credits annually in licensing fees. And we have carefully placed protégés throughout the hegemony's agricultural hierarchy who are perfectly capable of maintaining our innovations. Naya stepped up beside her sister. More importantly, we have detailed documentation of certain questionable practices within the hegemony's refugee relocation programs. Practices that would be quite embarrassing if they were to become public knowledge. Director Chun's composed expression faltered slightly. In other words, Lyra continued sweetly, we are not helpless refugees anymore. We are powerful, independent women making our own choices. The hegemony can accept this gracefully, or they can find themselves facing some very uncomfortable questions from the Galactic Ethics Council. The director stared at them for several seconds, then carefully put away her documents. I see, well, the hegemony always values entrepreneurial spirit. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement that respects everyone's autonomy. After she left, Marcus looked at the sisters with new eyes. You two have been planning this for a very long time, haven't you? 22 years, Naya admitted. We knew from the beginning that eventually we would need to be strong enough to stand up to the hegemony if we ever wanted to come home. Home, Lyra added, was always here. With you. The day of recognition dawned clear and bright, with the artificial lighting systems adjusted to provide the blue-tinged illumination that Karathi considered auspicious. The station's central plaza had been transformed into something magical, with crystalline decorations reflecting light in patterns that seemed to dance and flow. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to witness the ceremony. Marcus was amazed to see ambassadors and dignitaries from worlds he had never even heard of. Apparently, the marriage of the famous Karathi sisters to a human restaurateur had attracted galactic attention. The ceremony began with the traditional Karathi chant of lineage, where Lyra and Naya recited their family history going back 12 generations. When they reached their parents, their voices grew soft with remembered grief. When they reached themselves, they spoke not of their achievements with the hegemony, but of their time on Kepler Station. We are Lyra and Naya, daughters of hope, students of kindness, keepers of the flame that Marcus Chun lit in our hearts when we were lost and alone. Then it was Marcus's turn. Human marriage traditions were simpler, but he spoke from his heart about the 2 young women who had brought joy and purpose to his life, and the remarkable women they had become. But the most moving moment came when the station's resident chaplain, an elderly Zentari named Korvash, asked for the community's formal recognition of the union. The response was overwhelming. Not just the voices of humans, Karathi, Zentari, and other species Marcus knew, but a chorus of beings he had never seen before, all declaring their support for the marriage. Later, he learned that representatives from the Karathi exile communities throughout the galaxy had come specifically to witness this moment. To them, Lyra and Naya's marriage to the human who had saved them represented hope for their scattered people. The day of joining was more intimate. The actual vows were exchanged in Chun's corner, surrounded only by their closest friends and family. Marcus had closed the restaurant for the occasion, but the familiar setting felt right. This was where their story had truly begun. The Karathi marriage vows were unlike anything Marcus had heard before. They weren't promises of fidelity or support in the human sense, but declarations of spiritual and genetic bonding that went beyond simple companionship. We bind our lives to yours. Marcus Chun, Lyra said, her hand on his heart. Your joy is our joy, your sorrow is our sorrow. Your dreams become our dreams. What you have given freely, we return tenfold, Naya added, placing her hand over her sister's. What you have sown in kindness, we harvest in love. When it came time for Marcus to respond, he found himself speaking words he hadn't planned, as if they were being drawn from some deep place in his soul. I promise to love you both. Not as the children you were, but as the women you have become. I promise to support your dreams even when they take you far from here. I promise to be the home you can always return to, no matter what the galaxy throws at us. The bonding ritual itself was fascinating. The sisters produced 2 small crystals, not data storage devices this time, but living Carathi memory stones that would bind the 3 of them together on a level Marcus was only beginning to understand. Inspector Viga's cold eyes swept across the restaurant, taking in every detail. Her 2 companions, a reptilian Soren and a massive Corvinth, positioned themselves strategically near the exits, standard hegemony intimidation tactics. Mr. Chun, Inspector Viga said, pulling out a portable scanner. Our preliminary analysis of meals from your establishment shows nutritional efficiency ratings that exceed anything in this sector by over 300%. That's unusual for a frontier restaurant. Marcus kept his voice steady. I've been experimenting with some new preparation techniques. Have you now? Viga smiled thinly. And where exactly did you learn these techniques? Before Marcus could answer, Lyra stepped forward. From me. The inspector's attention snapped to her immediately. Marcus felt his heart sink. What was she doing? I taught him traditional cooking methods from my homeworld, Lyra continued calmly. My people have always been skilled with food preparation. Viga's scanner beeped as it analyzed Lyra's biosignature. The inspector's eyes widened slightly. Carathi, she breathed. You're Carathi? The restaurant fell silent. Even the background hum of the station seemed to fade away. Yes, Lyra said simply. We both are fascinating. Viga circled the sisters like a predator. According to our records, the Carathi homeworld was completely evacuated before the recent unpleasantness in the Outer Rim. All survivors were relocated to approved resettlement colonies. We missed the evacuation, Naya said quietly. We've been trying to reach the inner core for sanctuary. Without proper documentation, I assume. Viga's smile was sharp. That makes you illegal refugees. Mr. Chun, harboring undocumented aliens is a serious violation of hegemony law. Marcus stepped forward. They're not undocumented. They're my employees. I filed the proper work permits months ago. Permits for refugees are one thing, Viga said dismissively. Permits for Carathi are quite another. Their food technology is classified as a strategic resource under hegemony regulations. The sisters exchanged a glance. Marcus could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else, resignation. They had always known this day might come. However, Viga continued, and Marcus caught the subtle shift in her tone, the hegemony is not unreasonable. We recognize talent when we see it. She gestured to her companions, who produced official-looking documents. The Galactic Trade Hegemony would like to offer you both positions at our Central Agricultural Research Facility on New Geneva. Full citizenship, excellent compensation, and the opportunity to use your considerable skills in service of galactic prosperity. It was phrased as an offer, but Marcus recognized it for what it was, a velvet-trapped kidnapping. And if we refuse? Lyra asked. Viga's smile didn't waver. I think we all understand that refusing such a generous opportunity would be unwise. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. You can't just take them. They have rights. Mr. Chun, Viga interrupted. You seem to be under the impression that you have some say in this matter. Let me be clear. You are harboring 2 individuals whose very existence violates multiple hegemony security protocols. The fact that we're offering them employment rather than imprisonment is more mercy than you have any right to expect. She turned back to the sisters. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings. Our ship departs at 1400 hours. As the inspectors left, Marcus turned to the sisters desperately. There has to be another way. We can contact the Frontier Rights Coalition or maybe Marcus. Lyra placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's over. We always knew this might happen. But you're safe here, your family, Naya smiled sadly. That's exactly why we have to go. If we refuse, they'll destroy you too, your restaurant, your life, everything you've built here. I don't care about the restaurant. We do, Lyra said firmly. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us what it meant to belong somewhere. We won't let them destroy that. The next hour passed in a blur of hurried goodbyes and desperate plans that all came to nothing. The Hegemony ship was too well guarded, its departure schedule too rigid. There was no escape. As the sisters prepared to leave, Lyra pressed something into Marcus's hands. It was a small crystal, no bigger than his thumb, glowing faintly with internal light. What is this? A data crystal, she whispered. Everything. We taught you about food preparation, plus techniques we never had time to share. Keep it safe and remember us. Naya handed him a second crystal. This one contains our complete genetic and cultural records. If something happens to us, if we don't survive, at least our people's knowledge won't die completely. Marcus stared at the crystals, understanding the magnitude of what they were trusting him with. I'll keep them safe. I promise. We know you will, Lyra said. You're the most honorable man we've ever met. As they walked toward the docking bay, Lyra looked back one last time. Marcus? Yeah? Take care of yourself, and if we ever find a way to come back, you'll always have a home here, Marcus finished. The Hegemony ship departed exactly on schedule. Marcus watched from the observation deck until it disappeared into hyperspace, carrying away the two people who had become his family. Life on Kepler Station continued, but it was never quite the same. Marcus kept Chung's corner running, using the techniques the sisters had taught him to provide the best food in 3 systems, but the joy had gone out of it. Every meal he served reminded him of the 2 young women who had brought such light into his world. Years passed. The food shortages eased as new trade routes opened up. The Outer Rim conflicts gradually wound down. Kepler Station evolved from a rough frontier outpost into a prosperous hub of commerce. Marcus expanded his restaurant, then opened a second location, then a third. But he never forgot the sisters, or the promise he'd made. The data crystals remained hidden in a secure vault, their secrets untouched. Marcus had tried to access them once, in the early years after the sisters' departure, but they were protected. By quantum encryption that would take him decades to break? He realized they were meant to be opened only in dire circumstances or by specific people. 18 years after the sisters' departure, Marcus received his first clue about their fate. A Karathi trader arrived on Kepler Station, one of the few members of their species allowed to travel freely under Hegemony authority. When he learned about Marcus's connection to Lyra and Naya, his composure cracked slightly. You knew the Lightbringer sisters? He whispered. They are legends among our people. Lightbringers? That is what we call them. The sisters who preserved our cultural knowledge and shared it with the Hegemony. Because of their cooperation, the remaining Karathi were granted limited autonomy within Hegemony space. They saved our people from complete absorption. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Are they? Are they well? The trader hesitated. They are highly valued by the Hegemony. They have risen to positions of great responsibility within the Agricultural Council. But he looked around nervously. There are rumors that they have never forgotten their time on this station. They speak often of the human who showed them kindness when they had nothing. 4 years later, Marcus received a second piece of news. A Hegemony agricultural inspector arrived for a routine survey and mentioned, almost casually, that the famous Karathi sisters had been granted full citizenship and high positions within the Hegemony hierarchy. Remarkable individuals, the inspector had said. They've revolutionized food production across 17 systems. The Hegemony considers them among their most valuable assets. Marcus had simply nodded and served the inspector his best meal, but inside his heart had swollen with pride. His girls had not just survived. They had thrived. The 20th anniversary of their departure came and went. Marcus, now in his 50s and respected throughout the sector as one of the finest restaurateurs in known space, had begun to think he might never see the sisters again. The Hegemony rarely allowed its most valuable personnel to travel to frontier stations. No matter how prosperous they had become, but on a cold morning in late winter, 22 years after that day when Inspector Vega had taken his family away, Marcus received a message that changed everything. It was a simple text transmission, routed through multiple anonymous servers. Shun's Corner is still our home. Request permission to return. And then Marcus stared at the message for a long time, hardly daring to believe it was real. Then, with trembling fingers, he typed his reply, permission granted. Family always welcome? 3 days later, a sleek private transport docked at Kepler Station. It bore no hegemony markings, but its design and technology were clearly advanced beyond anything typically seen on the frontier. Marcus waited in his restaurant, which he had closed for the day. His hands shook slightly as he prepared tea using leaves the sisters had taught him to grow all those years ago. The door chimed, and they walked in. Marcus almost didn't recognize them. 22 years had transformed the frightened refugee children into confident, elegant women. Lyra and Naya had grown tall and graceful, their pale blue skin now marked with the intricate tattoos that indicated high status among their people. They wore fine clothes that spoke of wealth and position, and moved with the assured bearing of individuals accustomed to respect and authority. But their eyes were the same, large, dark, and filled with warmth as they looked at him. "Hello, Marcus," Lyra said. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the supply depot on Kepler Station. The frontier trading post buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of worlds docked to exchange goods, but today felt different. Heavier somehow. The usual crowd of traders, miners, and travelers seemed more tense than usual. "Another food shortage," muttered Crix, the four-armed Zentari merchant who ran the depot next to Marcus's small restaurant. "Third one this cycle. The hegemony's trade restrictions are strangling the outer colonies." Marcus nodded grimly. He'd heard the reports. The powerful galactic trade hegemony had imposed new safety regulations. That made it nearly impossible for independent food suppliers to reach frontier stations like Kepler. What used to cost 50 credits now cost 200. If you could get it at all. His little restaurant, Chun's Corner, wasn't much to look at. Just 6 tables crammed into a converted cargo bay with a kitchen that was barely larger than a closet. But it was honest work, and Marcus took pride in serving real food to travelers who were tired of nutrition paste and processed rations. The problem was, he was down to his last few days of supplies. As he walked back toward his restaurant, Marcus noticed a commotion near the station's waste disposal area. A small crowd had gathered, and he could hear angry voices. His stomach tightened as he saw what was happening. 2 young beings huddled against the wall, clearly terrified. They were unlike any species Marcus had seen before, though that wasn't unusual in this part of space. They stood about 4 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the station's artificial light. Their large, dark eyes were filled with fear, and they clutched each other tightly. "Get out of here," shouted a human security guard. "No begging on this station." "We're not begging," one of the beings said in accented but clear standard. Her voice was soft, melodic. "We just need somewhere to wait for transport." "Transport?" The guard laughed harshly. "With what credits?" "You're refugees, aren't you? From the Outer Rim conflicts?" Marcus pushed through the small crowd. The Outer Rim conflicts had been raging for months. Entire systems were being evacuated as resource wars spread across that region of space. The lucky ones made it to stations like Kepler. The unlucky ones didn't make it anywhere at all. "They're just children," Marcus said, stepping forward. The guard turned, recognizing him. "Marcus, these aren't your problem. Station regulations are clear about vagrants." "They're not vagrants. They're refugees." Marcus looked at the 2 beings more closely. They were definitely young, probably equivalent to human teenagers. Their clothes were travel-worn but had once been fine quality. "What are your names?" The one who had spoken before looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. "I am Lyra. This is my sister Naya. Our home world was destroyed 3 weeks ago." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Destroyed, not evacuated. Not conquered. Destroyed. It was happening more and more in the Outer Rim as the resource wars escalated. Our transport credits were stolen on Gantos Station, Naya added quietly. We've been trying to reach the inner core colonies, but ... But nobody wants to help a couple of blueskins, the guard interrupted. Look, I've got orders. No vagrants on this station. They need to move along. Where exactly would you suggest they move along to? Marcus asked, his voice getting harder. This is the last stop before the neutral zone. There's nothing out there but empty space and pirates. The guard shrugged. Not my problem. Marcus looked at the sisters again. They were trying to be brave, but he could see the desperation in their eyes. How long since they'd had a real meal? When had they last slept somewhere safe? They're with me, Marcus said suddenly. The crowd murmured. The guard frowned. What? I said they're with me? They're not vagrants. They're my ... employees? It was a lie, of course. Marcus could barely afford to pay himself, let alone employees. But something about the way the sisters looked at each other, the quiet dignity with which they faced their desperate situation, reminded him of his own sister back on Earth. She'd been about their age when their parents died, and Marcus had done whatever it took to take care of her. Employees? The guard looked skeptical. That's right. I'm expanding my restaurant operation. These are my new assistants. Marcus pulled out his identification pad and transferred a small amount of credits to both sisters. They're officially on my payroll. The sisters stared at him in shock. Lyra was the first to find her voice. Sir, we cannot accept your charity. We have nothing to offer in return. It's not charity if you work for it, Marcus said with a slight smile. Can you clean tables and take orders? Yes, Naya said quickly. We both can. Then it's settled. Marcus turned to the guard. Any other problems, officer? The guard looked like he wanted to argue, but a legitimate work contract was unassailable under station law. He muttered something under his breath and walked away. The crowd dispersed. Disappointed that the drama was over, Marcus gestured toward his restaurant. Come on, let's get you two fed and find you somewhere to sleep. As they walked, Lyra spoke quietly. You don't know us. Why would you help us? Marcus thought about it. Because someone needs to. And because I know what it's like to be far from home with nowhere else to turn. June's corner was quiet at this hour. Marcus led the sisters to a table near the kitchen and disappeared for a few minutes. When he returned, he carried 2 steaming bowls of actual vegetable soup, not the reconstituted stuff most places served. The sisters stared at the bowls as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Real food, Lyra whispered. Go ahead, Marcus encouraged. Eat. They ate carefully at first, as if afraid the food might disappear. But as they realized it was real and that Marcus wasn't going to take it away, they began to eat with the desperate hunger of people who hadn't had a proper meal in far too long. Marcus watched them eat and felt something twist in his chest. How long had they been surviving on scraps? How many places had turned them away? The hegemony destroyed your world? He asked gently. Naya looked up from her soup. Not directly. But their trade embargo made it impossible for our world to get the resources we needed. When the conflict started, we had no way to defend ourselves. The raiders came and ... She trailed off. Our parents told us to run, Lyra continued. They bought us passage on the last transport off-world. We thought we could reach the inner core, find sanctuary there. The inner core isn't what it used to be, Marcus said sadly. The hegemony controls everything there now. Independent refugees aren't welcome. The sisters exchanged a glance. Then what do we do? Lyra asked. Marcus looked at them for a long moment. 2 young beings alone in a hostile galaxy with nothing but their courage and each other. He thought of all the regulations and bureaucracy that made it nearly impossible for refugees to find legal sanctuary. He thought of the trade hegemony's stranglehold on commerce that was slowly starving frontier stations like Kepler. He thought of his own dwindling supplies and uncertain future. Then he thought of his sister and the promise he'd made to their parents to always take care of family. You stay here, he said simply. You work in my restaurant, you learn the business, and we figure out the rest as we go. But your supplies, Naya protested. We heard the other merchant talking. There are shortages. Marcus smiled grimly. There are always shortages out here. We'll manage. Over the next few weeks, the sisters proved to be remarkable workers. They learned quickly, never complained, and had a natural grace that made even the gruffest miners and traders smile. Lyra had an intuitive understanding of flavors and spices that helped Marcus stretch his limited ingredients. Naya had a talent for organization that kept the small restaurant running smoothly even during busy periods. But more than that, they brought something to Chun's corner that it had never had before. Hope. Marcus began to notice that his regular customers lingered longer, talking and laughing with the sisters. Crix, the Zentari merchant, started stopping by not just for food but for conversation. Even the grumpy station security chief softened a bit. When Lyra remembered exactly how he liked his coffee, the sisters were healing the community just by being part of it, but the food shortages were getting worse. The hegemony's restrictions had tightened even further, and prices for basic supplies had tripled. Marcus found himself making harder and harder choices about what to put on the menu. One evening, as he was closing up the restaurant, Lyra approached him hesitantly. Marcus, she said, we need to tell you something. He looked up from cleaning the counters. Both sisters stood before him, their expressions serious. We're not just refugees, Naya said quietly. Our people... We're Kyrithi. Do you know what that means? Marcus frowned. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place it. The Kyrithi were the original developers of quantum agricultural technology, Lyra explained. Our entire civilization was built around food production and distribution. We could make crops grow in any environment, process nutrition more efficiently than any other species. Understanding dawned on Marcus. That's why the hegemony targeted your world. Not for resources, but to eliminate competition. The sisters nodded sadly. We've been watching you struggle with the supply shortages, Naya continued. We know techniques that could help. Ways to stretch ingredients, to create nutrition from materials others will